What's up, guys? Today let's talk bait casting reel basics. Most people when they get into fishing, they're going to be using a spin cast reel or a spinning reel. You're probably familiar with these. These would be like your beginner reels that you find at Walmart or Cabela's or whatever. And these are very easy to use, user friendly. Bait casting reels are kind of a step up. They're usually going to be a lot better quality. They're going to last you a lot longer than a spin cast reel, but they do require a little bit of knowledge on how to cast them. So I'm going to go over that today. I'm going to go over the basics with you, give you some recommendations about which bait caster to purchase depending on your budget and what you're looking for. And hopefully you'll learn something and you'll be set to get your new bait caster and get out and catch some fish. So bait casting reels come in two different styles. This one is a round reel. So you can see it's got like a round profile here. It's not real easy to fit into your hand, but you kind of get used to it here. I like to put my thumb over it like this when I'm holding it. And then the other one, which I prefer and I feel like is a little bit more comfortable, is called a low profile bait casting reel. And so this is a Shimano SLX DC. You can see it's a smaller profile here. It's not round, it's more of like an oval shape. This one's a lot easier to fit into your hand. It's more comfortable, it's lighter, and it's just easier to fish with all day. And the reason why there's two different ones, people have personal preferences, but a lot of times your round reel is going to be more powerful and your low profile is going to be like an everyday go-to reel. But lately there's been a lot of advancements in low profile reels and they're getting really strong too. So overall I would suggest getting a low profile. Most people are moving to low profile reels these days, and generally that's where your best reel is going to be for everyday bass fishing. So let's go over the reel itself here. This is a Daiwa Coastal TWS 200 size reel. Now this has big power handles on it. You'll see there's differences here between reels. This Daiwa Fuego here has like smaller handles here. Both of the handles are great. I mean, there's not much difference between the two. These paddle ones are a little bit more for like a power setup, and these ones are a little bit more for just a normal lightweight setup. But I don't really notice much of a difference between the two. I don't really prefer one over the other. Some bait casters, like a bigger size for musky or saltwater, also have a power handle. So this just has one big knob here, and then on the other side there's no handle. So it's just one handle on here. This is generally for like heavy bait applications or big fish applications. You don't really find this in a small bass size bait casting reel. So right next to the handle here we got the drag system. So drag, you click clockwise to tighten the drag and counterclockwise to loosen the drag. And this just basically means that how easy it is to pull line off the spool here. So if you have your drag set really loose, it's quite easy to pull line off the spool. If you have the drag set really tight, it's going to be tougher to pull that line off the spool. So you want to have the drag set generally fairly tight, because if you make a long cast and you need to set the hook hard and penetrate those hooks through that fish's mouth, you don't want the line to be slipping on the spool here very much. But if you get a big fish on the line and it wants to make a run, you want to loosen that drag a little bit so that that fish can run without pulling your line and snapping it. Either snapping the line or pulling the knot out of the lure because it has too much pressure on it. Those big fish can really pull on it, and let's say you're using like 10 or 12 pound test line and you got a 4-pound bass on there. You would think, well, the line can withstand 10 pounds and this fish is 4 pounds. But when that fish is thrusting and struggling its tail, it can create more than 4 pounds of force, and it could easily break your line or straighten out that knot. So make sure you have your drag set tight enough at first so you can get a good hook set into those fish. But then if you see the fish or it makes a strong run, loosen the drag to make sure you let it run and it doesn't break your line. Next up is the spool tension knob. So this would be this little knob right here that you can loosen counterclockwise and tighten clockwise. So you want to generally have your spool tension knob tight enough so that when you're pushing the button on your bait caster here, your lure is dropping slowly. See, that's dropping a little bit too fast. So I'm going to tighten that spool tension knob a little bit. I'm going to hit the button, still dropping a little too fast. So I'm going to tighten it a little bit more. So hit the button, there's no dropping. So I'm just going to loosen it very slightly until, and then it just drops. I'm going to tighten it slightly more. And now you can see that bait is very slowly dropping. That's about where you want it generally, so that you get good casting performance without getting a backlash. Next up, to help you prevent backlashes, is the braking system on the side. So this Daiwa has a magnetic braking system that's called the Mag Force Z, and this is unique to Daiwa reels. So it's magnetic brake system to manage the tension on the spool here. Goes from 0 to 20. So 0 would be like absolutely no braking at all, and if you have it on 0, you're more than likely going to get a backlash because that spool will start spinning so fast that the line can't pull off fast enough and it'll just overrun. Generally on the Daiwas, I like to have it a minimum of about 6. This is a good one for light baits when you have no wind and you're not really trying to whip it out there as hard as you can. You're just taking a nice smooth cast. If you're really trying to whip it out there hard, I like to set it to like 8 to 10. And generally that's going to be good for long casting distance when you're really trying to whip it out there without getting backlashes. If it gets a little more windy, you want to set it up to like 10 to 12. Or if you're using really heavy baits. And then generally like 15 to 20, I'm not really using that much, but depending on the size of bait you're using and the conditions, you might go anywhere from 0 to 20. And then there's a couple different variations of this cast control on the side here. So this Daiwa has the magnetic one. This Abu Garcia here, round reel, doesn't have any on here, so you just control the casting by the spool tension knob here. And that's not really ideal. I mean, it works, this reel casts pretty good, but you can't fine tune it and dial it in as much as the other ones. Then something like this Shimano Curado K has a centrifugal brake. So you open the side plate here and it has a couple different knobs that are sticking out here. So there's 4 knobs. These you can click in and out. So this one's in right now. Push on it and you can click it out. Push on it and click it back in. Right now I have, let's see, I have 2 out and 2 in. So clicking them out makes it more tension on the spool. Clicking them in gets less tension on the spool. So if you're using a really light bait, you might want to only have 1 of these out. If you're using like medium baits or like your everyday setting, you want to have 2 of them out. And if you're using really heavy baits, you might want to have 3 or 4 of them out. And then on this Curado, it also has another little dial here for more or less tension. So this one goes 1 through 4. So more is down and 1 is the least amount of brake. You can click it down to 2, 3, and 4 and that will give you more brake. So 4 different possibilities with a centrifugal brake, 4 different possibilities there. That's more versatile than some reels that just have the centrifugal brake. And then last but not least, the Shimano DC reel. So I only have the SLX DC, but this actually has a computer chip in here that monitors your spool speed 1,000 times a second. So that's the digital computer in there is monitoring your spool speed, giving it tension to make sure that you're not backlashing. And then that has 4 settings on it. So the first setting would be the least amount of braking. That's when you have no wind and you have light lures and you really want to cast far. Number 2 would be like your everyday settings for light to medium lures, or if you want to get good casting distance. I think it's set for monofilament and braided lines, but this would be like your everyday settings with a good balance of distance and backlash control. Number 3 is set up for fluorocarbon line, so this is similar to 2. You just put it on 3 if you want good casting distance and resistance to backlash with fluorocarbon line on there. And then 4 would be the most amount of braking, like say you're a beginner or it's really windy conditions, or you're trying to skip your lure off the water under things, you would put it on setting 4. Next up, there's a couple little variations in the level wind. So this Shimano SLX has a little circle here that's called a level wind. That is what controls your line when you're reeling it in. So this will go side to side on here and wind your line evenly on the spool. So again, I'll show you that. When you're reeling in, this level wind here is going side to side, making the line wind nicely on your spool. And then when you're casting, the line is going through that level wind out. And most of the reels you find, most of the manufacturers have a level wind system similar to this one. But Daiwa has a kind of a revolutionary one. Don't fall. Daiwa has a revolutionary one. It's called a T-wing system. So this, you can see, is a lot different. It's like a bigger triangle here. So when you're clicking the button and letting the spool loose, it folds down. So there's a lot of possible ways that line can move side to side. So when you're casting and the line is coming off the reel, instead of that line going side to side through a small hole, it's now got a lot bigger hole to go through, and that reduces friction, so it gives you a better casting distance. And then when you engage the spool, it comes up, and when you're casting, when you're actually throwing a cast out there and you're not just letting 2 inches of line out, it'll get sucked into this groove here. So it's still gonna be a narrow diameter when you're reeling it in. It's gonna spool it on that line, or on that spool, nice and good. Then when you hit the button, you got this falls down and you have more room to cast, less angles, and more room for that line to come out. So this is pretty awesome. It increases your casting distance. Once in a great while, if you're in like windy conditions or something, your line will kind of get trapped in here somehow. It's happened to me once or twice before, but very rare. And it's a great system from Daiwa here. So guys, last up, I'm just going to go over the sizes of the bait casting reels you could get here. 50 to 70 size, that's the smallest size spool. That's going to be for your finesse fishing, where you don't need a ton of line capacity, or you're using lighter line, like less than 10-pound test monofilament or fluorocarbon, or like less than 40-pound test braid. For finesse light bait options, that's a great size. For like your everyday bass fishing size reel that can really do it all, you're going to be looking at a 100 to a 200 size, and probably more than likely a 100 to a 150 size. So this is good for anywhere from like 10 to 20-pound test monofilament or fluorocarbon, and like 20 to even up to 65-pound test braid. This is a good size for. 200 is going to give you good line capacity and long distance, or a lot of line capacity, so you can make a lot of long casts even when you have that big line on there, like the thicker diameter line, and it's not gonna, you're not gonna cast it all off. So if you're looking to put a lot of 20-pound test fluorocarbon or something on there, like I have on one of my setups, 200 size is the best for that. 300 to 400 size is going to be like generally your musky fishing size reels, or your large pike or striper or any bigger species. And these are good for holding more of like 65 to 100-pound test braid. They're generally going to be more powerful reels, and these are for bigger species, like I said. And then 400 plus is generally for like saltwater species, or maybe for big catfish or big sturgeon. But these reels are going to be really powerful. They're going to hold a lot of really thick diameter line, and those are what you need for getting those giant fish in quickly and efficiently. Next up is gear ratios. So basically what you need to know for this is the lower gear ratios are generally like the more powerful gear ratios. So for like a 5.2 to 1 gear ratio, this is good for deep cranking. This is good for lures that have a lot of water resistance, and it's going to bring in the least amount of line. So 5.2 to 1, generally going to be like in the low 20-inch range for bringing inches per crank. And then your everyday bass fishing reels for multiple different options, the best gear ratios you could have is 6.3 to 1 or 7.2 to 1, in my opinion. These are the most versatile. 6.3 to 1 and 7.2 to 1 are going to bring in a decent amount of line per crank. So you're not going to be like the slower power ones like this. They're going to be more built for versatility and speed. And then you have your 8.1 to 1 and above gear ratios. I think the latest one I've seen is like 10.1 to 1 on a Boo Garcia reel. And those are like your high speed retrieves. Those are going to be the ones that bring in the most amount of line per crank. So if you really want to like burn your bait and get it in quick, or let's say like you're casting out a buzz bait into weed pockets and you need to, as soon as that lure hits the water, you need to get it up planing before it sinks into the weeds. The higher gear ratios are good for that. Or maybe like you're fishing docks in a tournament and you cast up by the dock, you work the dock, and then from the end of the dock to the boat is unproductive water. You want to get it in as fast as you can and keep your lure in the strike zone for the longest period of time. You want those higher gear ratios for that. So guys, now on to recommendations. If you're looking to getting your first bait caster and you don't have a whole lot of money to spend, like let's say less than $100, but you want to get something that's still good quality and it's going to last you a long time, this would be my number one choice. This is a Daiwa Fuego CT100. So this is a great all-around bass reel. It's got the Meg Force Z, so a lot of versatility in the cast control here and settings. I got this spooled up with 30-pound test braid, so the 100 size is perfect for 30 or 40-pound test braid, or let's say like 10 to 16 or 17-pound test mono. And this is just a great all-around reel. It feels really good in your hands, really sturdy. It's got a great drag on it. It's held up well over the last 6 months that I've had it, and I put it to the test on rivers on some strong smallmouth bass, and it's handled great so far. So this is definitely a good like entry level, less than $100 reel. If you are looking at getting a mid-level, or maybe even you consider this higher end reel, I have the Shimano Curado 200K and the Daiwa Tatula SV TW. These are both great reels. I think I got the Curado for like 165 bucks and the Tatula was like 180 bucks. But not a whole lot of difference between the two. The Curado K has the centrifugal brakes. The Daiwa has the Meg Force brakes. So the Daiwa is easier to dial in. Both have a great drag, both have good casting distance. I think it's about the same with the two. The Shimano has micro module gears, so that feels really smooth, but the Daiwa feels also pretty smooth. I don't even know what size Tatula this is. It doesn't say on there, but the Tatula is smaller, easier to palm, and just a more comfortable reel, but you really can't go wrong with either one of these reels if you're looking for a good $165 to $180 option, depending on where you buy them. These would be my two recommendations. If you're looking for one that's really versatile and easy to adjust, I'd go with the Tatula SV TW. Now, if you got the money to spend, but you're not really good at casting bait casting reels, you're a little nervous, this is the one I would go with. This is the Shimano SLX DC. So this is the one with a digital chip in there. It's pretty easy to use, very user-friendly for beginners or people that haven't had a lot of experience with a bait caster. This one retails at 190 bucks. And if you're nervous about it, if you're nervous about getting a bait caster, but you really want to get one and you have the money to spend, this is a great option. I've only had this for a week actually. It's brand new, so I can't really speak to how well it holds up, but it feels solid. Shimano's definitely known for making quality reels that last a long time, so I think this thing is going to have really good shelf life, and it's a really good option for beginners here if you have the money to spend. So check this one out. And now if you want something that's going to handle big baits well, or powerful bait caster, the Shimano Tranx 200 is my top pick. I got this on a heavy action rod with a big bait. You can see here, this is a 1.5 ounce bait, and it's spooled up with 20-pound test fluorocarbon. Handles extremely well. The gears on this are super solid and strong, and this thing is just an absolute workhorse. So if you need a strong reel with good line capacity for bigger baits for bass, I would definitely go with the Shimano Tranx 200. When you're going to cast a bait casting reel, you push your thumb in, hold the line there, pull it back, and then you're gonna let go right at about here. So not at 12 o'clock, at about 2 o'clock, you're gonna let it go and then hoist the lure that way. So it looks like this. So I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna go forward and let go. And then I'm gonna put my thumb down on the spool right before the lure hits the water, or in this case, the concrete. And that's gonna stop that overrun from happening. I'm gonna take a cast, and I'm not gonna put my finger on, and you see as soon as that lure hits the water, it overruns and spools over like that. That's what you don't want. So you put your thumb on there to stop that from happening. Now with this Tatula SV, if I'm setting this correctly, let's try about a 9. And I'm going to go and take a cast with it. My spool tension's slightly too high, or too low actually. So I'm going to tighten that a little bit. Now I should be able to cast it with this SV. Not have to worry about putting my thumb on the spool and see it doesn't overrun there. That's when you know you got the cast control set correctly. But on other reels that aren't quite as good as this Tatula SV, you're still going to have to put your thumb down on there. And if you really want max casting on this, you're going to have to set it a little lighter, and you're still going to have to put your thumb on there. But if you want to make sure you're not getting any backlashes, you can set the magnetic cast control a little bit higher so you're not getting those overruns.